Imagine settling into your favorite chair, letting your shoulders drop, and allowing the noise of the day to drift away. Now, picture someone sitting across from you, speaking calmly, offering gentle guidance for how to move through life with more grace, more patience, and a softer heart. That's the spirit in which this summary is delivered, inspired by the message at the core of "Don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff." A book that reminds us that so much of what feels urgent, dramatic, or overwhelming isn't actually as big as it seems. When we learn to shrink the small things back to their true size, we reclaim our peace, our emotional clarity, and our capacity to appreciate the moments that really matter. The book's central idea is beautifully simple. Most of the tension we carry isn't caused by major life tragedies, but by the tiny stresses we allow to dominate our attention. A rude driver, a slow line at the store, a coworker's irritating habit, a minor disagreement at home, a misinterpreted message, or a moment of inefficiency. All of these little jolts stack up and convince us we're living in constant turmoil. But as Richard Carlson gently shows, the real source of suffering isn't these moments themselves, it's our response to them. And if we can adjust our perspective, if we can learn to let life unfold with a little more acceptance and a little less reactivity, we begin to notice that we're capable of moving through our days with far more calm than we ever imagined. The journey toward this calmer way of living begins with understanding that perspective is everything. Carlson invites us to imagine how often we've blown something out of proportion, taking a minor inconvenience and allowing it to ruin an hour, a day, or even a relationship. He encourages us to pause before reacting, to remember that we have the ability to see beyond the initial emotional spike. It's not about denying emotions, but about observing them with enough distance to choose a compassionate response rather than an impulsive one. When someone snaps at us, instead of snapping back, we might consider that they're having a tough day. When plans change, instead of being frustrated, we can treat it as an unexpected opportunity. And every time we choose patience over irritation, we reinforce a mindset that protects our inner peace. Carlson's message isn't about becoming passive or ignoring real problems. Instead, he prompts us to notice how often we treat minor issues like emergencies. One of the most liberating shifts we can make is understanding that inconvenience is not catastrophe. A messy house is not a crisis. Someone disagreeing with us is not a threat. Even a personal flaw we wish we didn't have is not a fixed identity, but simply a reminder that we're human. In this way, the book helps us lighten our sense of self-importance, not in a diminishing way, but in a way that frees us from the exhausting belief that everything hinges on our control. As we settle deeper into this perspective, the narrative begins to explore how the pace of modern life pushes us into constant urgency. We rush through tasks, conversations, and experiences, always chasing what's next. But Carlson invites us to slow down and reconnect with the idea that life is not a race. If we choose to move through the world with intentionality rather than haste, we begin to notice details we've long ignored. The kindness in someone's tone, the softness of a morning breeze, the satisfaction of completing a task without feeling pressured to sprint to the next. Slowing down brings us back to the present moment, where calm naturally resides. Another theme that emerges is the power of humility. Not humility as self-deprecation, but as the ability to release the constant need to win, to be right, or to prove ourselves. Carlson suggests that when we loosen our attachment to always having the upper hand, conflict loses its grip on us. We begin to notice that we don't need to correct every mistake we hear or express every critique we feel. Sometimes peace is more valuable than victory. Imagine finishing a conversation without that lingering tension of wanting the last word. Imagine stepping back from an argument and feeling your shoulders lighten instead of tightening. Humility in Carlson's teaching becomes a doorway to a more peaceful existence. Connected to humility is the practice of compassion towards others, but also towards ourselves. We spend so much energy judging our own shortcomings, replaying mistakes, or worrying about how people perceive us. This inner harshness creates a constant background hum of stress. What if we approached ourselves with the same generosity we offer a friend who's struggling? What if we forgave ourselves for being imperfect? When we shift from criticism to compassion, we create space to grow without the weight of self-imposed pressure. From here, the book moves into the importance of embracing acceptance. Not passive resignation, but the understanding that resistance to reality only amplifies stress. When we encounter situations we can't change, traffic, delays, other people's choices, we have a choice: fight against the moment and exhaust ourselves, or accept what's happening and adapt. Acceptance doesn't remove the challenge, but it removes the additional suffering we create by insisting things should be different. Through acceptance, we learn to meet life where it actually is, not where we wish it had landed. As Carlson continues guiding us through these ideas, he emphasizes the transformative power of gratitude. Gratitude is not just a feel-good concept, it's a perspective that reorients us toward the beauty and goodness quietly present in our everyday lives. When we focus on what we lack, stress naturally grows. But when we actively acknowledge what's already supporting and enriching us, a comfortable bed, a safe place to live, someone who cares about us, the ability to breathe deeply, the privilege of learning, our sense of scarcity softens. Gratitude shifts our narrative from "nothing is enough" to "there is so much here." And the more we practice gratitude, the more we train our mind to look for the positive rather than the problematic. Another central idea in the book is the recognition that our thoughts are not facts. Our minds constantly generate interpretations, predictions, and assumptions, and we often accept them without question. Carlson suggests that when we step back from our thoughts, when we give ourselves a little breathing room, we start noticing that many of our stressful interpretations aren't rooted in reality. For example, when someone doesn't respond right away, we may assume they're upset or ignoring us, when in reality they may just be busy. By seeing thoughts as passing mental events rather than absolute truths, we create space for calm. This shift helps us catch ourselves before spiraling into stress based on stories the mind invents. As the narrative unfolds, Carlson turns our attention towards the role of kindness. Kindness isn't simply an action, it's a mindset that realigns us with what truly matters. When we choose kindness, we soften conflict, deepen connection, and create a more peaceful environment, both internally and externally. A gentle word, a patient look, a small gesture of understanding. These simple acts ripple far beyond the moment. Kindness reminds us that even in a world that often prioritizes efficiency or competition, we can choose to move differently. We can choose to create warmth rather than friction. In the same gentle spirit, Carlson speaks about building resilience through small acts of surrender. Surrender is not defeat, it's release. It's letting go of the fantasy that we can and must control every outcome. When we surrender the need to manage every detail of life, we reclaim our energy. We begin to see that much of stress comes from clinging too tightly to expectations. But when we ease our grip, life becomes more fluid, more manageable, and less combative. This isn't about giving up on goals or abandoning responsibility. It's about allowing life to unfold without wrestling with every twist and turn. Another important insight is the realization that life becomes richer when we learn to listen more deeply. Carlson invites us to consider how often our minds wander in conversation, planning what to say next, instead of truly hearing the person in front of us. When we listen with presence and curiosity, relationships strengthen, conflicts dissolve before they escalate. We become less concerned with how we are perceived and more engaged with the shared humanity in each interaction. Deep listening transforms communication into connection. There's also a profound message in the idea of letting others be right sometimes. This practice doesn't mean suppressing our truth or abandoning our values. It means recognizing that many disagreements aren't significant enough to justify tension. When someone believes the movie came out in a different year, or insists they remember an event differently, or express a viewpoint that doesn't harm anyone but differs from our own, letting them be right can be an act of tenderness. It reduces unnecessary friction and keeps our emotional energy available for moments that genuinely matter. As the narrative continues, Carlson guides us towards simplifying our expectations. He encourages us to acknowledge that perfection is an illusion and that striving endlessly for it leads to inevitable burnout. He proposes a gentler approach, doing our best, accepting our limitations, and recognizing when good enough truly is good enough. This mindset doesn't lower our standards, it recalibrates them to align with reality. When we stop expecting perfection from ourselves and others, we become more patient, more forgiving, and more attuned to the bigger picture. This leads naturally